because I think that as Black people, we are always finding ways to show our joy, but also our discontent. Now, sometimes it's coded how we
Yeah.
do that,
Yeah.
but that's been a part of our creative ethos for a very long time.
Most definitely.
Right.
And I would be remiss sitting here in Philadelphia if we didn't also show love, if not necessarily 88, but for another woman who was very big in getting hip hop it's the platform that it deserves, and that would be
That's right. The great Lady B.
Lady B.
That's
right.
Yes.
That's right.
Right.
All day,
every day. Okay. All right. I knew Lisa would be a great guest. Anyway, so
this is fantastic.
we got one more email. This is from Michael Sykes, Vincent.
Hey, what's up, Michael?
Watching us in real time, but listening to our show.
Right. Michael is going through the archives, reviewing episodes. So it's a real Black Mirror thing going on.
And he has made his way to one of your favorites, Vincent.
Okay.
The Monkey Hustle.
The Monkey Hustle. That's right.
From 1976.
That's right.
Hello, Len and Vincent. I listened to y'all podcast about the 1976 movie Monkey Hustle.
Yes.
Starring Yaphet Kotto and Rudy Ray Moore.
Yes.
A.K.A. Dolomite.
Yes.
This movie is a monkey hustle, all right? It hustled me out of an hour and 30 minutes that I can never get back. Y'all compared Monkey Hustle to the 1976 TV show What's Happening.
Yes.
Saying the episodes have no plot and nothing really serious happened throughout the series, which is true.
The stakes are low.
But the episodes were funny and left a great impression on me, like when Rerun tries out for the Rockets, a.k.a. the Lockers.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Or when Raj's mom got fired from her job because her boss accused her of stealing her ring when all along it was her husband.
Yeah.
What's Happening always left a great taste, whereas the Monkey Hustle left no taste nor smell. It didn't make me laugh at all. I can make myself laugh in a dark room with nothing or nobody in it, blindfolded, thinking of jokes. I don't know.
That's a lot of information.
I don't know who's the worst runner in movie history. Yaphet Kotto or Steven Seagal.
Okay.
Yaphet Kotto is a great actor. I loved him in Across 110th Street, Live and Let Die, Blue Collar, Out of Sync, which also starred LL Cool J. I have and will stand up for movies y'all don't like, including Above the Rim, Ghost Dad, and Who's the Man.
I actually like Ghost Dad. That was you.
But this, I won't. I agree with y'all. This movie is horrible. It does nothing and goes nowhere. And the theme song is bleeding in my ears. Signed Michael Sykes. It's what he has to say of The Monkey Hustle.
Right. Here's the thing, though. Rudy Ray Moore plays a character that's not Dolomite, but his whole deal is he dresses in gold all the time.
Yes.
And his name is Goldie.
Yes.
I think that in and of itself,
that's the best you can.
That's the best.
That's the best you can do.
The movie. Lisa, have you ever seen The Monkey Hustle?
No, but I really thank your listener for giving me the warning to stay very far away and to save my time.
You can skip it. You can skip it. He didn't mention Rosalind Cash.
There might be a connection to D'Urville. Is there a connection? Monkey Hustle, D'Urville, Brock Peters? Is there something there?
Well, D'Urville Martin is in Dolomite with Rudy Ray Moore, so it gets him right. It immediately gets the Monkey Hustle.
Is Lisa trying to play 6 Degrees of D'Urville Martin?
It sounds like she might be trying to play 6 Degrees of D'Urville Martin.
I don't think I could do it. I'm more of a Brock Peters kind of girl, or an Ivan Dixon. You know.
Okay.
That's more my jam.
Right now, you can get to Brock Peters.
Oh boy.
Because Rudy Ray Moore D'Urville Martin is in Guess Who's Coming to Dinner with Sidney Poitier, and then Sidney Poitier is of course in Porgy and Bess with Brock Peters. And Brock Peters in Sidney Poitier is also in A Raisin in the Sun with Ivan Dixon. So that's how you get to them real fast. So
All right. Well, we had an impromptu 6
6
of
degrees.
D'Urville Martin, brought to you by Lisa Cortez, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes.
Are you not entertained?
Yes.
All right. Before we get talking about Little Richard, I do have to touch on something that came up on the show last week and has been burning the airwaves of the internet ever since. Last week on the show, Lisa, I learned that you should not give a newborn baby honey to eat. It's one of these things that, along with shrimp and I think something else,
Right.
that you're not supposed to give a baby honey to eat. Vincent informed me of this.
My children are younger than Lynn's. So in Lynn's defense, he hasn't been around children as recently as I have.
Right. My daughter's 30 years old.
Right.
So, but however, that little snippet of conversation was our Micheaux Mission Shorty that went out on social media. And I think it went out on a 10 a.m. On like that Tuesday or Wednesday. By 10:15, it had 1,500 views.
Yeah.
And more than enough comments saying, well, first of all, people telling me that you can't give honey to a baby because of the bacteria.
Right. Botulism.
Botulism.
Yeah.
Then also, men, why don't y'all just look it up on Google?
Right.
Then they were coming at your neck
Because
even though you know that you're not supposed to give honey to a baby,
yes,
you couldn't explain why you couldn't give honey to a baby.
Why do I need to explain why? The pediatrician says don't give the baby honey. You don't get a baby honey. Like what? Like, is this a hill
Apparently,
to fight about?
the people were fighting.
Like, I want to get a baby honey. Why do you want to get a baby honey? And I'm saying a pediatrician. A pediatrician told me, my cousin is a neonatal nurse. She's a baby nurse. She yelled at me about this.
Really?
About me not knowing about the botulism and not knowing exactly why. And she yelled at me about that. She's yelled at me, don't even get me started about grapes.
Grapes?
Oh, you got to cut grapes in half.
For the baby.
For children surprisingly old, you're supposed to cut grapes in half because they can get stuck.
That depends on the size of the grape.
You know what? Don't play with grapes.
That depends on the size. Look at Lisa's face. She like,
honey,
she's killed babies.
And batteries. You got to lock up the batteries.
Well, okay.
Because the kid is swallowed. And my cousin has horrible stories. Like terrible stories that she tells. And then at the end, I say like, but the baby got better, right? And then it's just quiet in the room.
What the hell is happening here?
I'm saying. So no, I don't ask no questions.
I think this PSA.
Yes.
I think this PSA is very important.
Yes.
Batteries, honey, and grapes.
Right, you got to cut grapes in half for a surprising. My joke is I'm going to cut my son's grapes in half until he gets married. And then his wife's going to do it.
He's going to expect his wife to do it.
Right. We should probably think about that. Yeah.
In my country.
So there you go.
So thank you, ladies and gentlemen, who...
Infants don't get honey because of botulism.
Yes.
There you go.
So don't do it.
So don't do it. Cut the grapes in half because they get stuck.
And lock up your batteries.
Right. And lock up your batteries because children swallow batteries and bad things happen when the batteries start to dissolve and it's hard to get to them.
Right.
So there you go.
Wow. What a setup for me.
How you like that, Lisa? How you like that? No, Lisa says she liked it when I thought you liked it when we dipped and dab. Now we dip it and dabbing. You want to dip and dab? We dip it and dabbing.
This is when Lisa's...
Let's just reset. Let's just reset, okay?
This is when Lisa's assistant breaks in and is like, okay, so Lisa has to go.
Right. We forgot that she had a meeting.
No, we are about
Tell the president to wait. Okay.
I like that. She said, tell the president to wait.
right.
I'm on the Micheaux mission.
That's right.
That's right, Lisa. Okay. All right.
All right, let's get into it.
Let's
Let's go.
Little Richard, I Am Everything. I will pull up which I had right there. It is. Boom. Okay. Boom. Boom. Little Richard, I Am Everything, the one-of-a-kind rock and roll icon who shaped the world of music. A new documentary that is debuting in 2023 that tells the story of Little Richard, the rock and roll legend from the 50s until his final days, and puts him in the true context with not only music history, but world history and cultural history as well. And joining us tonight, ladies and gentlemen, to talk about this monumental documentary as we close out September's Doc to School look at Black documentaries, it is none other than the producer and director of that film, LISA Cortes. Lisa, I'm going to start with my question, and then I'm going to let Vince go at it. Again, thank you for joining us. How is it that you came to wanting to create or document the life of Little Richard in this way?
Little Richard passed away during the pandemic.
Yeah, 2020.
I don't know about you guys, but for me, the spring of 2020. I don't know about you guys, but for me, it was a time of, staying inside the house, eating chips and onion dip, and having too many cocktails, and in my hands all the time. It's not a good space. And I was actually finishing a film, All in the Fight for Democracy, that I did with Liz Garbus and Stacey Abrams. And we were just moving ahead to get that film done, to get it out before the election. But I would take some downtime, and I was looking at social media, and I see all these people talking about what Little Richard meant to them. Mm-hmm. And it's, from Bob Dylan to Dave Grohl, Elton John. And I was like, oh, let me find a doc. I want to learn, learn more, what lies beyond Tutti Frutti. And I discovered that there wasn't anything. And the more I spent time looking at his story and when he comes on the scene and how he kind of broke so many musical and cultural norms, as a filmmaker, I realized that there was nothing little about Little Richard, and that talking and exploring his journey allowed me to not only look at music history, systemic racism, what it means to be transgressive, and the ripple effect of what he started and what we see now in so many artists, but are unaware that they are carrying Richard's DNA.
Yeah, I think, we joked a little bit about it's not going to be that much of what we would usually do with a review, because I just thought this was an extraordinary documentary, frankly. And my review would just be kind of listing all of the things that I thought this did well. And I think from the very beginning, I think what I put in my notes more than any other word was situate. The way you situate Little Richard in this conversation. I think you kind of spoke to it a little bit about there wasn't a real documentary about him, and we talk about Little Richard. People kind of know the name, and I'll just say personally, as someone who fashions himself a music fan, when I thought about Little Richard, I have like two Little Richards in my head. You have the images from the 50s where you would see him in movies, you know, Rock Around the Clock and, you know, The Girl Can't Help It, as you cite in the film. And it's old footage of him, but it's on film. And then you have the Little Richard of, frankly, my childhood, where he's an older man, and I think he's almost, it's you almost kind of dismiss him as campy. Like, you like the music, you appreciate the music, you acknowledge the music, but you know, it's like it's Little Richard doing the Little Richard stuff on Arsenio Hall and stuff. And I was struck immediately by the footage of him in the 60s and in the early 70s. The concert footage. And he's so vital, and he's so strong, and he's so, frankly, sexual. And there's the perspiration, and you know, his hair is kind of out of, because he's performing. And it struck me just how transgressive he was from the first moments of the documentary. And you know, we were joking either last week or the week before last about like Andy Williams, you know, joking about white people in the 50s getting kind of upset about these, and you know, we all kind of roll our eyes. But the footage showed like he actually was, by definition, transgressive. Like, this is a little dangerous. Like, this is actually doing what this art is supposed to do. And I guess, you know, my question, obviously it was deliberate, but how did you, like how did you come to, basically, this is how we're going to start this thing?
Well, in making a documentary, I think the beginning of your film is something that you actually have multiple beginnings. And then after you have fleshed out the entire film, you come back and you tweak your beginning a lot. Mm-hmm. So we knew the basics, that in the beginning, we wanted to have our cold open and set up our thesis. But I think it was through spending time with the interviews that were then done and the archival footage that we were able to tweak the beginning to not only illustrate how unique and different he was, but how special as a mentor he was to everyone from the Beatles to the Rolling Stones, Billy Preston, Jimi Hendrix, James Brown, and that you then realize that this man who had been on talk shows telling people to shut up, telling people, you know, oh, where's my Grammy? That there is actually something, there's a churn of anger. Mm-hmm. There is a legitimate desire to be recognized. There's a need to be compensated. And so that all of this is underneath that campy figure that you talked about seeing on TV, and it's justified. You know, I think one of the great breakthroughs, I was talking to the editors, Nev and Jake, about the beginning in the very early days. And I said, you know, I think he is otherworldly. It's almost like he's arrived from another place. He is bringing this energy and magic. And then we talked about, well, how do we show that? How do we illustrate that? And that's how we set up the film at the beginning with this explosion. Mm-hmm. And then it gets really quiet. And then we see the cosmos and everything goes away. Because we're establishing that he is like the big bang of rock and roll. And then there is nothing that follows him for some time. but we set up this motif of the particles,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
particles that he is activating on Earth. And at certain moments in his life, they really start to grow and become more energized as he is kind of connecting, with body and spirit, and this mission to deliver the gospel, because that's what he's delivering.
Mm-hmm.
He is delivering the gospel of rock and roll. He is giving you church. He is engaging in call and response. I think some of what he is doing is akin to speaking in tongues. But it is performative. It is musical, and certainly it is laced with a lot of sexual innuendo that you would not find delivered by your neighborhood minister.
No, most certainly, most certainly. I'm curious because the one thing that hit me, there's a few things that hit me in regards to the documentary, and I love the documentary every bit as much as Vincent did. But the one thing that hit me was how open he was, or at least seemed to have been, about his sexuality throughout his life. It wasn't a matter of just once he became, quote unquote, Little Richard and developed this persona. He was already engaging in developing personas all along, from doing performing in drag at one time early on in his career to but even before that, he was already playing around with like makeup and his hair, and I actually found it very I guess not inspiring is not the right word, but just a little like all right, Rich, I'm here for you. That he seemed to immediately embrace who he was sexually as a gay man right from at a very young age, to the detriment in regards to his relationship with his family, though, and that's what seems to come across in that documentary. Did you find that to actually be the case?
A great source material for the documentary and framing principle is Richard's words. We, at the beginning of the project, did a very big sweep to make certain that we could find his voice to narrate the telling of his story. I completely believe in the importance of giving agency to your subjects.
Yeah.
And from the beginning, Richard tells you, he wanted to take his mother's curtains down and wear them as a dress, which of course made me think about the famous Carol Burnett skit where she's walking, Gone with the Wind, and she's wearing
with the curtain
rods. And I was like, oh, I wonder how Richard styled his curtains. But Richard tells us, hey, from an early age, this is what I was drawn to, but I'm equally drawn to the church. Mm-hmm. And so we set up in the beginning of the film the great struggle that is going to occupy him for the bulk of his life, a struggle that is not specific to him. I think we all know many people who have found it difficult to balance what they believe is doctrine versus what they believe is carnal.
Mm-hmm.
I think the religious aspect of this documentary is as you said, it's not, this religious struggle is not unique, but to R&B singers, soul singers, but certainly his sexuality complicates his journey. And I thought it was so gripping watching how he kind of dealt with it as the years went by. And I love the fact that it didn't really have a nice, neat ending. Like there was no real bow on how he kind of dealt with that. You know, one of the most striking moments for me in the documentary was the footage of him from, it looks like a few years ago. And he doesn't have a wig on, and he doesn't have the makeup on, and he's on, it looks like he's on a televangelist, and he just looks like he looks like an old man, and he's still grappling with it. And I love that your storytelling leaves it for us to kind of make our own peace with it. And, again, it's not like this nice, neat package. So I guess, how do you work through that with him and this religion?
I think of an interesting turning point. Well, I think, first of all, understanding that people are beautifully human,
Mm-hmm.
and that the journey is never a straight line. It's got hills, valleys, twists, and turns. And, Richard his journey is even more dramatic because it's this roller coaster of renunciation of one lifestyle and then embracing the complete opposite. And, that dynamic of him going back and forth is so interesting to chart, because it's accompanied by different musics.
Yeah.
So, he leaves in the late 50s, and he does this The King of Gospel Singers record, which is so beautiful. But then he swings to the other side and goes to England and jumps off of balconies and turns people out, including, these seminal rock bands like the Beatles and the Rolling Stones. It's I think there was a time when we were almost through with the film, and I was contacted by his former wife, Miss Ernestine.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, I said, Miss Ernestine, we've been trying to find you, and it's so lovely to speak to you. But at that point, we were literally finishing the film. We had no money to go and interview her. And she said, I don't want to be on camera, but there are some things that were important to Richard that I want to have the opportunity to say. So that's why we hear her voice in the film. And she's there at 2 points. One, to talk about their marriage and what they shared.
Yeah.
But we hear her at the end of the film to share that, like, at the end of the day, he loved God, but he loved everybody.
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes we do not recognize what it was like for someone born in the 1930s versus kind of the privilege that we were born into, because so much progress has been made on many different levels. Mostly we know the story of the sacrifices made with the civil rights movement. But I would like to argue that there's also a sacrifice that Richard made of living his life out loud at times, presenting certain ways of how to be in the world with makeup and a more feminine slant for a man, and to blur the gender lines, because I think it goes bigger than male female, but it's like, let's blur the lines. And there is something to be said about that braveness, about that revolutionary act, and what it means for freedom for everybody, and loving people, maybe not having the vocabulary, and I don't mean vocabulary in words, but the emotional vocabulary to encompass this recognition of all of the selves that you encompass, but just showing it. And by the mere act of doing that, I think he gave permission for so many other people who were not musicians, but were people who were looking for other ways of gender identity.
Yeah, most definitely.
Yeah. You just mentioned that tour after his religious break where he took England by storm. And this is the moment where the Rolling Stones and the Beatles sort of come in contact with him, and there's contemporary interviews with Mick Jagger, and then you have this, you have Paul McCartney talking, and then you have there's so many moments in this documentary. I was telling Lynn where I said they could have stopped here and talked for 45 minutes about this. Like, you have that moment where Nile Rodgers talks about his conversation with David Bowie, and David Bowie talks about, I want to do something like Little Richard. And I love the contrast of these three iconic rock stars being so transparent about what Little Richard meant to them, with the reticence and the outright, pardon the pun, whitewashing that American rock and roll did with him. So that you kind of had these dual narratives of these people. And I did say, I wonder how their Englishness informs them being more open to saying, oh yeah, we're just straight copying Richard.
Well, I can say for Mick Jagger and Tom Jones, and even Niall's recounting of his conversations with Bowie, that they idolized him. That's I think what got lost in translation for so many people.
Yeah.
Was how venerated he was to these artists. I mean, Rock and Roll by Led Zeppelin, the beginning of the drum roll is literally the drums from Keep a Knocking. Like, we talk about, when we sample, how we're playing homage to, the Spinners or whoever, or Coltrane if we're sampling them. These rock artists were also playing homage, but you had to know how to follow the breadcrumbs to realize what they were doing. Because, just like when you're sampling, you don't go, well, the first 4 bars are Coltrane, and then I'm mixing in a little bit of, Bud Powell. Like, no, you make it your own thing. But I think for anyone who is a student of music, you start to go, but wait, where's the vibe coming from? Right. You bring your own, but there's also this other vibe that you are leaning into for support that elevates and makes this really special.
I was left watching this wondering, there is no mistake, at least to me, maybe there's an argument to you bigger hip hop heads, the two of you. There's no mistaking to me that as big an artist as James Brown was in his super heyday and remained throughout his career, right? That the anointing of James Brown was made because of hip hop and its repackaging of his music and really presenting it in a different light out there.
Right, to a new generation.
Right. Yeah. And that's when James Brown becomes like really the godfather of soul to me, in my eyes, right? I wonder how much, despite his pronouncements, as much as Little Richard, would definitely shout from the mountaintops of, who he was in the pantheon of music, right? There is certainly a point where maybe because of the way he appears and the way he talks and everything like that, it becomes a little bit more performative, almost a little campy in his later years. But I wonder how much of it is because his true heyday musically is the 50s, which is music that is not sampled as much outside of maybe rockers who maybe will steal a lick or a drum lick, and it kind of like gets more hidden in the mix than a straight sample. Because that music is not sampled, he doesn't doesn't have the benefit of that resurgence, that recontextualizing that James Brown and then other artists in the 60s and then 70s had. Because I'm also reminded about Minnie Riperton and how much Q-Tip is celebrated for bringing her memory back.
Sure.
So I'm wondering if that also is kind of like is the reason why he wasn't as celebrated, because it wasn't just the world that wasn't celebrating him like that. To be fair, at least as far as I can tell, we weren't really celebrating him for the accomplishments that he had either musically.
I think it's a really good point. I thought it's also someone like Brenda Russell, who has been sampled so much. People, as they say, fame is flitting, and he had his moment. And in speaking with Ramon Hervey, who was his publicist, and actually manager, excuse me. He was really trying to put more wind in his sails, but Richard, was also not his best advocate at times.
Yes.
And I think Richard, what I understand is that when in trying to manage him, he wanted to do things the old school way, not understanding how the business had changed, and that it's hard to move from the Paleolithic period to the Mesozoic era. You got different skills from one era to the other, and adaptation for everybody is very challenging. To go from one modality of being on top of the world, having hits, people losing their minds for you, and being one of many artists on an oldies review show.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's funny. Just a bit of Micheaux mission history. A couple of years ago, we reviewed Cadillac Records, and Chuck Berry was such a part of the Chess Records story and of that film. And I went on a deep dive afterwards into Chuck Berry, and Chuck Berry, kept making records.
I know.
And so like I went through this period. I was listening to all these 70s records from the 70s that Chuck Berry made. And I dipped my toe in and I thought about it today. Little Richard has a couple of really interesting albums in like 71. I think one of them is actually called The King of Rock and Roll. And it is, kind of like you said, you get the sense that he almost won't keep just keep going, like keep doing this. But it's almost like he gets pigeonholed into this oldie slot. Like there's this wonderful moment where one of the scholars says it's almost a mixed blessing being inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, because on the one hand, yes, it is acknowledgement, but on the other hand, it's like them saying, okay, you're done.
Yeah.
And it's like he still had all this in him, but we just want this old stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Shame.
I was just smiling when you said he did different records, because he also does the children's records too.
That's true.
Yes.
That's very true. That is very true. It's interesting because unlike a lot of performers of his time, not unlike a lot of performers of his time, Richard definitely has his run in with drugs, right? And it's touched on in the documentary. But usually what happens when we see these stories is that not only does it become like this destructive force in their lives, but it also starts to seed its way into how they deal with the other people in their lives, right? And you see people kind of like talking about it. And it was interesting that in this one, where the documentary does not shy away from it, but you get the sense that one, he then kind of like leans on his faith, or at least that is the implication, that he leans on his faith to kind of pull himself out of it. But there's never really a point in this documentary where the people who seem the closest to him, and compliments to you, because not only do you touch on people who were important to his life professionally, but also personally, from people that he grew up with, to neighbors that he grew up with, to people that just friends that he made along the way, in and out of showbiz. But none of them have like that moment where the worm turned
right
with Little Richard. He was always trying to present the best that he could of himself to them.
Right.
At least that's the way that it came off to me. And I actually appreciated that, because that is really a window behind the flamboyance, behind the makeup, behind the hair, and the pomp and circumstance. That's a look at the actual man himself, and I appreciated that from the documentary.
I think I'm always interested in the interiority of the characters that I'm looking at. We all come with a lot of ideas about Richard based on whether we know his music, his television appearances, or seeing him on film. But what I wanted to look at is, what are the circumstances that form this person? What is the internal conflict? What does it mean to be so otherworldly, introducing something with so much force and vitality that has never been seen before, and that lights imaginations and young people? It sets them aflame. Like, that is a lot to carry. And I think that what we see in the film is, yes, the great performances, the funny appearances, but we also hear his ruminations on where he is on his life journey at different times, and the questions that he is trying to balance. And that's when the friends and family are very helpful in telling the story. And also our scholars. Some of them knew Richard, some of them didn't, but they are all Black people. Some of them are queer. And I think that they are bringing their learned experience with their school training to help us as a viewer understand in 2023 what it was like in 1955 to be stepping out into the world so loudly, so unapologetically unique. Because we sometimes forget the slow road of progress, but because we live in a time where we certainly have more freedoms than our parents or grandparents. And really, Richard is, I think, from the generation of, our parents, who we know from growing up, told us to be leery of so many things based on the racism and terror that they experienced. So, there's been a little bit of a mind wash for us and the younger people who follow us to not understand how rigid things were, how dangerous. Yet at the same time, this is what I love about America, like, when it comes to this gender nonconformity, Richard's not the first.
That's true.
There's the artists we talk about in the film before him.
That's right.
And we know historically there's, evidence documented of drag balls in the late 1800s in Washington, D.C. William Swan was arrested for dressing as a woman in, I think, 1888, which underlies something that I am hoping audiences leave with, that Americans are not as conservative as we've been led to believe. There have always been outliers. Now, have we told their stories with fullness?
No.
No. And I think Richard allowed a great vantage point to look at the uniqueness of his journey and his contributions, but also this interesting lineage that he comes from.
Yeah, yeah. We were talking about these elements that make Little Richard, like that form this man, and once again, one of the things that I love so much about the documentary is almost the unapologetic blackness of where he comes from. We talked about this queer tradition, but this is a black queer tradition with Billy Wright and Esca. I always mispronounce his name, Escarita.
Yeah.
And the documentary really just goes down the line. Like, it's not just, it's a black church tradition. You name check the Clara Ward singers, Sister Rosetta Thorpe.
Mm-hmm.
You have Louis Jordan in here, and that's always been my little thing, like that kind of alchemy that happens between jump blues and rock and roll that no one ever really mentions. Like, I love the images of Little Richard with all the saxophones, which is, that's all jump blues. The Ike Turner part about the percussive piano playing in
Rock 88.
And Rock 88. And I just loved how it connects him to this tradition and to this heritage that he is ours, and he comes from this, and certainly that the gumbo that is Little Richard is it goes without saying super unique. But I love how there's this acknowledgement of where these ingredients come from.
Well, aren't we all cousins, right?
Amen.
Hey, cuz, but and each cousin is coming with their pod, but there is this overlap, and it's a part of the continuum. And when it comes to the story of Black people in rock and roll, I think the story that we're most familiar with is Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it's so ironic that Jimi Hendrix was in Richard's band, and then they had a falling out, but that this man really is he owns what he is claiming. Mm-hmm. He's not on a rant. He is an important part of the structural integrity of this genre. Yes, there is Bo Diddley. Yes, there's never a sole architect. There are many when you are building, this, but his claim is very justified. And this film is about the receipts.
There it is.
There you go. It's interesting the way you just layered that. Again, I all roads lead back to Run DMC for me.
Right,
but because the way you layer that with Bo Diddley and Fats Domino, who were definitely and others are definitely like that architects of rock and roll, right? But then with Little Richard, who takes a little bit of everything, right, of everything that comes before him, and then mixes it with his own style, what he's bringing to it. And then from there, that is kind of like that final building block from which everything else springs forth. Because you talk about how, from Little Richard, like from the beginning of the documentary, what feels like found footage of him in concert, like, and Vincent, you're talking about how virile and strong he looks in this. If you squint your eyes, you swear you're looking at Prince, but it's Little Richard.
And can I just say, as a style thing, I'm gonna speak as a spades player. I love how you held the big joker of Prince until the very end. Like Lynn said, it's clearly Prince. And like the whole documentary, it's like, oh, and he, you know, and he inspired all these people. And you're waiting for Prince to show up. Mm-hmm. Because clearly there's a straight line, but it's like looking for that big joker. Like you're playing who's got the joker? And then when you hit it at the end, where it's just that beautiful montage of all of these singers. I have to say in full disclosure, I always was I didn't really like all that architect talk, because it seemed to me like this was trying to sidestep a straight challenge to Elvis as the king. Like, oh, I'm the architect. But damn if this documentary doesn't make the case for it. Like, he built it. Like, and that montage at the end where, you know, you just keep seeing image after image after image after image of singer and entertainer, and you're like, damn, that's just Little Richard.
Yep.
It's just Little Richard again. Like, he really was the architect.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
When you look at the schematics of a building, you know, they slice it in half, and you got your lower basement, your lobby, level 2, blah, blah, blah. You know, you cannot deny with how this film lays out his story adjacent to that of the growth of rock and roll, that on the ground floor is Richard, you know.
Thank you.
And he's put his hands in the wet cement. I would say in the you know, maybe the basement belongs to Sister Rosetta, and Escarita, but definitely the ground floor where you enter, where your entry point, you look down and you will see, you know, his hands there, his impression, his touch. And it's a touch that is not a light one. It is so deep, it is so visceral, it is so moving, it is so rebellious, it is so spiritual. It is holding so much, because he did. And he really showed the breadth of his reach through his music.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did.
Wait, am I dropping the mic now? I feel like that's my mic drop.
That's your mic drop.
Look.
That's your mic drop.
Look.
That you did it. You did it. You killed it. You killed it. Ladies and gentlemen, look. The question is, would we recommend Little Richard, I Am Everything?
Look. Not only would we recommend it, we're going to do something that we never do. It is on Hulu. It is on Apple. I believe you can get to it on Prime. I think Hulu, you can get to it if you had a rich people Hulu without the commercials. Right. Is that where you watched it? You got the rich people Hulu?
Yes.
Yeah. yeah. This is a definitive statement. On a definitive icon. Yeah, absolutely. It
is a great documentary. Learn the story of Little Richard, and we're going to have Lisa back on just to talk about the craft of making a documentary, because the way she kind of like talks about how she like intersperse, you know, like explosions and particles and overlays them on the image, and then she talks about Little Richard is like this rocket ship, and you see this meteorite flying to Earth. I mean, like, it is fantastic imagery in this documentary. And then she brings in contemporary singers to play out actual moments from his career. Goodness. I'm like, yo, we can just like her assistant is sort of like screaming at us like she gotta go to the bathroom. Like, no, we gotta let Lisa go. But Lisa, thank you so very much.
Thank you. I could talk with you all forever. I look forward to returning. And also the film can be found on CNN On Demand.
Okay, CNN On Demand.
It's available there now. And in November, it will move to Max, which will be the final home to find the film.
Perfect.
Thank you for your good works. Keep the honey, the batteries, and the grapes, the full grapes,
right,
away from your children. Keep it away now.
And Lisa, we'll have to have you back on, and next time we'll just let you select your a black movie of your own choice, and we'll just sit here and review it.
Yes.
Okay?
Okay. It's going to be fun. I think it's between The Wiz and Black Orpheus.
Ooh. Sounds like Black Orpheus is the winner.
Okay. Thank you so much. And thank you to everybody who's tuned in. And continue to subscribe to their Micheaux Mission, because you're going to have great people, conversations. You're going to learn a lot. And you guys are such a value add to the world. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes.
All right. We'll let you go.
Take care.
Yes. Good night.
Bye-bye.
Good night. Good night. That was great.
That was
Thank
great.
you guys so much, really.
That was You're welcome, Molly.
Yes.
Molly making herself known here on the show, ladies and gentlemen.
Look, I said, we could got some wings.
What?
Come on.
For all day. Mm-hmm. All right. But ladies and gentlemen, before we tell you what is going to be happening next month here on the Micheaux Mission, I invite you to please send your feedback. Let us hear it. Bring it on. Email us at themicheauxmission@gmail.com. That's MICHEAUXMISSION@gmail.com. Like and follow the Micheaux Mission on all the social media of your choice, whether it be Instagram, whether it be Facebook, whether it be Twitter. You can find us at Micheaux Mission. You can also follow us on YouTube, where you can like and subscribe and hit the bell so you can be notified when we put up new videos, new shorties. I saw Dylan making time marks over there like crazy. I think we may have a record number of shorties coming out of this interview.
All right.
So definitely check us out. The Micheaux Mission streams every Tuesday night live here from Young Junk, Philadelphia's premier video podcast palace. Go to the videocontentfactory.com and check out how you can book your time in one of the fabulous studios that they have here in the palace, but not this one, because this is ours. It is branded as so. All right. And the Micheaux Mission is also a proud member of The Podglomerate, thepodglomerate.com. They make podcasts work. All right. Next week is October.
Yes, sir.
And that means it is Bootober. As we do a month-long look at black horror movies, ladies and gentlemen.
Did you all have a host in Philly? Did you all have like a host?
Dr. Shock.
Dr. Shock.
Yes.
He was on when you were a kid?
Yes.
Like, when did he go off the air, do you think?
Probably actually maybe I may have been around 15, 16 when he went
So
off.
this is like
Fairly
in the 80s. And yeah,
70s, 80s. Dr. Shock.
Yeah. We had The Count.
The Count.
We had The Count on one channel, and then we had Ghost Host on the other station. Ghost Host. He was actually disembodied. It was just a voice.
So it was just a voice.
It was just a voice, Ghost Host. But then The Count was a personality on the station during the week, and then he actually dressed up like Count Dracula.
Oh, well, Dr. Shock, he more or less, he wasn't like a vampire, but he just looked like a mad scientist.
Yeah.
But he had like kind of like a tuxedo on, so it wasn't really if I remember.
Yeah.
Or maybe a suit. But yeah, we had Dr. Shock on Channel 17.
I miss the host.
I do too.
I miss the host.
And there's some of them that are still out there.
Yeah.
Because I think there's somebody, I can't remember the name, so I don't misname him, on Me TV.
Yeah, there is.
Yeah, and it's kind of
for our younger missionaries back in the day when you didn't have a VCR, you didn't have a DVD player, you couldn't stream things. Genre films were shown usually on the weekend.
Yep.
Like
Yep, Saturday afternoon.
Saturday afternoon, or at night. At night.
Yes.
Because it was Saturday night in Baltimore, and there would be a host, and he would dress up and kind of host it, and it was part of the whole experience.
Yeah, like he'd be like in some kind of like haunted house.
Right. So when Lynn did the voice just now, you actually reminded me of Ghost Host.
Oh. Should we come dressed as hosts for Bootober?
Yeah. No.
Yeah, I did think
Yeah,
so.
you know.
I know you're not.
I know. You just
Yeah. Maybe I will.
Hey man, do you?
'Cause one of us is.
Right.
He ain't. No. But next week, ladies and gentlemen, it will be Bootober. It will be a month of horror movies kicking off, and we're going to start with a different kind of horror movie because it deals with vampires, but in a different kind of way.
Yes.
And it's called The Transfiguration. Transfiguration.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
From 2016. Next week, here on the Micheaux Mission. This is Vincent's selection.
Yes.
I'm really interested in this movie.
Yeah, so am I. I haven't seen it.
I know. Yeah, we was actually supposed to do it like some time ago, but things went wrong in the Matrix. But now we're doing it, and I can't wait to check this out.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
All right, that's next week here on the Micheaux Mission. Until then, he's Vincent. I'm Len, and in parting, we say,
we'll see you when it's time to meet again.